Hey art nerds, today we are putting the ShuttleArt alcohol markers that Alli lent me to the Natto Studio field test. So I'm going to create this piece for you guys today. Of course, we're going to begin with color selection. So here are the swatches from my unbox and swatch video, which you guys can also check out. And you guys will find a link down in the description below, as well as a partial transcript of everything that I discussed in this video. So if you missed something or if you're looking for something, please check the description. If you guys have any questions, hit me up on my Discord server, The Paint Box. You'll find a link for that in the description down below as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select some colors that are going to go well with this piece. Now, don't let the bag that these are in fool you. Alli rehomed her markers into a more suitable case. So these are indeed the ShuttleArt markers, and they've just been rehomed. Since the 80-piece set, although it says it comes with a case on Amazon, it doesn't show what case it comes with, and I somewhat suspect that perhaps it does not come with a case at all. What this set also didn't come with was a colorless blender. I'm not sure if Alli removed it and replaced it with her own preference, or if it just never arrived at all, so I can't really comment on that. So we have 80 colors to choose from. There are a lot of gray tones in this set that kind of skew the color gamut a bit and can make color selection within this set a little bit more of a challenge. You guys can see the range of colors we have here. We also have a few fluorescent colors as well. Now, for a full review, I do recommend that you guys check out the unbox and swatch video that I'm linking down in the description below. I will also have links to Amazon where you guys can pick these up if you're interested in them. These are bullet tip and chisel tip alcohol-based markers. These do not seem to come with refills, although you probably could refill them if you found good matches with Copic or with the Blick system. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the colors that I'm going to use for this piece. And the colors that I ended up using were 76 for the sky, 43 for the grass in the background, 7 for the skin, BG1 for the eyeshadow, and then 48 and 43 for the eyes. For the bodice, 17, 6, and 5. For the skirt, 76, 74, and 71. For the apron, 76 and BG1. For the apron trim, I used 17, 6, and 15. For the rest of the grass, I used 48, 43, and 42. And for the hair, I used 103 and 91. So I started by selecting colors for the skin and hair and the grass at first. And the piece that I used for this demonstration, I'm going to have that available on Gumroad. My wonderful, wonderful art nerds over on Patreon will have access to the line art. If you guys want to color along or color using your own colors, you guys will find a coupon for that via Gumroad. And you guys can join the art nerd community and help support what I do here on this channel. We don't see any outside sponsorship or support by joining me at patreon.com/nattosoup. And art nerds get access to videos way before everybody else does. So it's a great way to get early access to all kinds of neat projects and to help support what I'm doing here on this channel. So to begin, we're going to use number 76, which is like sky blue, to fill in the sky, and I'm using the chisel tip to fill in the sky quickly. And then I use the smaller bullet tip to fill in the fine areas, and as you guys can see, the sky is kind of patchy. I sort of decided to lean into the patchiness once I finished filling it in, but I'll fill it in and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I used the same sort of fill technique that I used on the ColorIt marker review. In fact, these markers in terms of body are very similar to the ColorIt markers, but I find that the colors that ShuttleArt chose to include in their 80-piece set make color selection somewhat difficult. I felt very limited when it came to skin tones and appropriate hair colors, and even when it came to shadow colors and blending pastels. So now I'm just going to use the bullet tip to kind of fill in the rest of the areas, but you guys can kind of see what I mean by patchy. It's hard to get full saturation with these, so getting even color coverage is going to be difficult. I also found that these markers are fairly scratchy and a little bit dry. I'm not sure if it's because I'm reviewing a set that belongs to somebody and they've already had a chance to use it, or if the markers themselves are just a little bit underfilled. Now, since I have grass here, I wanted to kind of break up the area where the sky meets the grass, so I included some grass strokes of blue into the grass to kind of break that up. And now I'm building it up with another layer of blue in the background, kind of leaning in to that patchiness. So I did another partial layer, and then once I'm finished applying this partial layer, I'm going to spritz it with rubbing alcohol to break things up. So I'm just masking with my hand just to kind of keep it from hitting her face or hitting the area around her face. And then I'm kind of dripping it in. What I was hoping to do was really lighten the blue up in some areas. So I allowed it to dry, and that really exacerbated the patchiness. So it didn't push the color to the back of the paper like it normally would with alcohol markers. Instead, it kind of just sat there and made it darker, which is a really unusual reaction. So the alcohol did not have the effect that I'd hoped. And since there's no blender in this set, I'm going to use the Blick Studio Brush Colorless Blender. And I'm applying the background layer of grass, and I'm using number 43. That's a bluer green. So I'm going to work, or it's a bluer green of the greens that I've selected. It's not really a blue green, it's more of an olive, but I've selected 3 greens, and it's the bluest of those. So beginning with the skin, I did 2 layers of Cosmo number 7, applying it in small strokes. And Cosmo is basically a super light skin tone base rather than a hot pink like the cap implies. And I also used the light blue-green for the eye shadow and blended it out with the Blick Colorless Blender. There isn't really a good skin tone blush pink in this set, so I decided to use number 84, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So I mentioned previously that I'm using number 84 as the blush color. I used number 84 in the Milo Art set for the Kara piece that I did. And it worked well for that piece, but it's a kind of a different color in this one. Even though they are the same color name and the same color number, it's way too hot and too dark to be used as a blush. And there really weren't a lot of good options for blushes in this set. There weren't enough light pinks. Cosmo, as you saw, is really more of like a light Caucasian skin tone. So I tried blending it back a bit with number 7, Cosmo, which helped, but it didn't solve it. Number 3 might have been a better blush choice. It's more of a blood red color, but at least it would have been more of a natural color than number 84. So I'm applying the skin's shadow with number 25, Salmon Pink, and the color combo is really kind of fluorescent and just bad. It actually looks better in the recording than it does in person. I'm not excited by the color selection in this set, but perhaps if I'd gone with something more fairy key and saturated rather than fairy tale and pastel, I would feel differently. However, with 80 colors, I feel like I should be able to accomplish both with that kind of color range. And I'm just applying the salmon to the areas that I would want to be in shadow. So the tops of the eyes, under the bangs, the insides of the ear, under the neck, areas where skin is being crossed over by something else and there might be a cast shadow. So once I finished applying the skin, I started on the bodice. And while coloring the bodice, I noticed that it's very apparent that these are obnoxiously prone to blending, particularly if you're working wet alcohol over wet alcohol, which also facilitates blending, which is why I'm doing it. I also found that the bullet nibs on these are really stiff and dry and scratchy, and they're fairly unpleasant to use. And that could be because these are used and they may be running dry. And these scratchy nibs lead to patchy colors. The colors that I'm using on the bodice are 17, 6, and 5. And we started with our lightest color and worked darker from there. And you guys can see, since I'm mostly using the small bullet nibs for this, it's because the chisel nibs are very difficult to control. That doesn't mean the bullet nibs are they're different and difficult in their own kind of way. It doesn't mean they're like a lot better. They're slightly better. So for the skirt, I'm applying a layer of number 76 Sky Blue, which is the same color I used for the sky. And then I'm going to apply a layer of 74 Brilliant Blue. And it's difficult to fill in large areas with the bullet nib. It's very tiring on the hand, but the chisel nib is too difficult to control for this sort of application here on the skirt since we're working around all that grass. I'm going to give both of those layers a chance to dry. We're still on the 76th layer, so after 76, we're going to apply 74. And with 74, I'm really just leaving a very light highlight of 76 just to show kind of sunlight maybe hitting her skirt. And this can get really tedious when you want to build up color and you have multiple layers to fill, or you're really trying to saturate the paper so you can get rid of scratchiness or patchiness. The bullet nibs are just, they're really time consuming. They're tiring to hold. They're scratchy. They don't give enough ink. They're just kind of unpleasant to use. Even though theoretically, these are the same markers as the ColorIt markers. They're the same body. They handle a bit differently. The ColorIt markers are more juicy, and I like the color selection a lot more. I also like both the Milo Art and the Milo Pro markers better than these. And as you guys saw in the Unswatch Box video, they utilize the same body. ShuttleArt could theoretically offer a brush tip. I don't know that they do, but I don't think they do from checking Amazon. So that might be something that ShuttleArt wishes to consider, but honestly, I think they're probably just one of many companies that are trying to cash in on very inexpensive alcohol markers that all utilize the same body type. So I don't necessarily feel that any feedback I give is going to be something that they would consider. So maybe just keep that in mind as someone who's interested in purchasing alcohol markers. So after I applied layer 74, or number 74, I gave it a chance to dry, and then I applied 71 Cobalt Blue and blended that back out with 74 Brilliant Blue. So that's the color I'm using now, number 71. Then I went back and kind of fixed and blended the sky. Oh, sorry, no. I'm using the sky blue as a light blue on the bodice, and it's really more blue than I thought. So there isn't really a light blue in this set. The sky blue is the lightest blue we get. So I applied it as the shadow to the white shirt and apron, and I really didn't like it. It's way too dark for what I'm doing. I tried blending it back with the Blick Colorless Blender. No dice, it didn't really budge. I'm going to let it dry a bit and then go over it with BG01. Then at least it'll sort of even out the color. And I just kind of leaned in. Once I applied it to her shirt, I was like, well, I'm committed now. And I applied it to her apron as well. And covering a larger area like the shadows on her apron, it's really difficult. When you're working with bullet nibs like this, you can't rely on the brush to do a lot of your work. When I use brush markers, I really rely on the mark making and the flexibility of the brush to help me achieve a lot of what I want to do. But if I'm using bullet tip markers, I actually kind of have to draw that shape in by hand and then fill it in very carefully, and it just becomes a more laborious and tedious task. So now I'm going over it with BG01, which will even out the color. And I kind of like it better now. I feel like it works a little bit better. So for someone who likes brush type alcohol markers, bullet type markers require so much time and precision. I can usually get what I want, but the brush tips are just much easier for me, and I can rely on that instead of laboriously drawing things in. So for the trim on her marker, we're starting with number 17, Pastel Pink, and then I'm going to draw in circles with number 6, Vivid Pink, to help me place the design. And once I do that, I'm going to fill in the negative space with number 6. And I do that using really short lines because I'm trying to give it the look of embroidery. And I added stripes to imply embroidery to the trim with number 6, Vivid Pink, and I added Colorless Blender to the center of the circles to lighten them up a little bit. Then I went back into her bodice and just kind of tightened up some of the shadows, added more depth, blended some things out, just kind of worked with it a little bit more. So now I'm going back into the trim and I'm applying number 5, Cherry Pink. And I find that it's very difficult to fill in small areas like the lacing on the bodice, which I'll get to in a minute, with the bullet nib, because it's very prone to just kind of bleeding out. You would think the bullet nib would be good for really fine areas, but actually a plastic nib would be much better for that. Bullet nibs are kind of like the no man's land of alcohol markers. And I'm applying the lacing with number 74, Brilliant Blue. And this is just to kind of illustrate my point that I really struggled to get it to stay within the lines. I couldn't actually really touch the bullet nib to the paper. I had to kind of like gently hover it and let a single fiber touch the paper. So unfortunately, I lost the footage of me rendering the majority of the grass. I do apologize. I started with number 48, Yellow Green, to create the foreground of the grass using blade-like strokes of the bullet nib. Then I layered number 43, Deep Olive Green, on top of it, and then I applied it with chunky chisel tip strokes to blend some of the areas out a bit. Then I applied number 42, Bronze Green, to help blend all of the colors. And grass is particularly difficult for me using the bullet nib because we have to go over the strokes a few times to kind of build up the width that we want. So with grass, I would recommend that you start with a blue and work your way to green or even yellow as you approach the foreground. So for her eyes, I actually used one of the greens from the grass. I used number 43 and 48. And for her hair, I am applying a layer of 103 Potato Brown to the hair, and I'm trying to leave the white of the paper for my white highlights. And then I allowed that to dry. Now, allowing your alcohol marker to dry is going to give you a chance to kind of layer your color. So if you apply wet marker onto wet marker or fresh marker onto still damp marker, you're going to get softer blends and transitions. If you apply it after it's had a chance to evaporate and dry out, and that tends to be very quick because it's alcohol marker rather than water, then you can get stronger transitions and you can build up color more quickly. And I applied another layer of 103 to help develop the color like we just talked about, and I allowed that to dry as well. And again, I want to thank Alli for allowing me to borrow the ShuttleArt markers. This came up after my first Milo art field test, or my first Milo art test. Alli noticed that they shared a color system, they shared a lot of color names, and they shared the same body, and we thought it would be interesting to do a comparison and review both. So that is why we are here today. I want to thank Alli again for allowing me to use her markers. After the Potato Brown has had a chance to dry, I applied a layer of 91 Natural Oak. and allowing it to dry gives me a stronger contrast, so we're able to develop the volume and the form a little bit more. For her eyes, I applied another layer of number 48 and then quickly applied number 43 so it would blend a bit. And now I'm painting in clouds using Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White to hide some of the patchiness of the clouds. I probably should have used white gouache for this because Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White is one of the most opaque white correctional fluids, so it's great for correcting black and white illustrations or adding highlights. Not super good for building up, say, subtle cloud transitions. They definitely seem a little bit cartoony in a negative way here. And this kind of reminds me of the Iron Lock Striker review I did several years ago. I really struggled with those markers as well, and I had problems with the sky as well. So I decided to paint clouds to cover the sky using the same products. Oh, how history repeats itself. And just to give the clouds a little bit of definition, I'm going in with number 76 on top of the clouds to break up the forms a bit. Now the bullet nib, being as scratchy as it is, actually wants to kind of scrape up some of the bleed proof white, even though I allowed it to dry fully. If this was a brush, that wouldn't be an issue because a brush is flexible, it's less prone to scraping and tearing. So I am adding in some white highlights to her hair and to break up some of the forms on the dress. And while I do that, I'll give you guys my verdict. I am not a fan of the color selection of the set. That's like my biggest complaint. You have 80 colors, but there's so many grays and not enough soft pastels to actually help build up color. The bullet and chisel nibs also make it more frustrating to apply color, and I find that these are a bit dry. I'm going to compare them directly to the ColorIt alcohol markers because it's the same body. They're both bullet and chisel nib markers, but the difference is the ColorIt has a better color selection, a better gamut of colors. And while I understand including grays to your set because you might want to do monochromatic work, and grays are often useful for adding shadow or for draftsman work or concept art, for a set that is probably being aimed at teenagers, including that many grays is just not going to be that appealing. You want bright colors, you want pastels, you want skin tones, you want fluorescence even. Including that many grays is just kind of a waste of what you got going on. So this is not the worst alcohol marker set I've ever reviewed. That distinction probably goes to one of the fine color sets I reviewed years ago. Speaking of reviews, if you guys enjoy my reviews, I have a lot of alcohol marker reviews here on this channel that you guys can check out. Just search for alcohol markers, and I also have an alcohol marker playlist. I want to thank Alli a third time for allowing me to borrow her markers so I could create this review for you guys. And if you guys enjoy what I do and you want to help support it, please join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/NatoSoup. I work hard to make these reviews. I try to give you guys honest reviews based on my own experiences, but of course sometimes our opinions will differ. If you guys want to share art that you've made using the ShuttleArt markers, let me know down in the description below. Just say hi and say you want to share your art with me and leave a link. And I'm happy to check it out, particularly if you're on Instagram. I'd love to do a follow for follow because I'm always interested in following more artists. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you guys found this review to be helpful, useful, and informative. Maybe you learned a few tricks for using your own inexpensive alcohol markers. Like I said, I have loads of alcohol marker reviews here on this channel, and my field tests are usually treated like tutorials. So if you're looking to learn a few tricks to get the most out of your inexpensive markers, check out some of my other really good inexpensive alcohol marker reviews here on this channel, particularly the Artix markers, the ColorIt markers, and the Milo Art and Milo Pro markers. Those should all be full of really good information for you guys. I hope I see you guys again in the future. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing and clicking the notification so it lets you know when this channel updates. The colors used for this tutorial are going to be specific to the ShuttleArt and other markers of that type. So they may differ and you may have to do some color matching. I did list all of the colors that I used in the description below, as well as a transcript of how this was created and the colors used. So thank you guys so much for watching.